It's been a pleasure to do this because I've suddenly realised the last time I interviewed you was a long time ago. It was way back in 2004. The last time we actually sat down and did an interview.
Wow.
So
Wow,
long,
that is a
long.
long time.
It's a pleasure because this is the first time you've actually done an interview about your first album. So it's a privilege to be doing this for you. It's a privilege.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a privilege to be getting interviewed by yourself.
But I mean, obviously, throughout the album, I mean, I can hear a lot of different styles and influences on that. But I mean, can you kind of point out some of the players that have influenced you in your playing and how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah. So, like, this album basically is a collection of things I loved as a kid growing up. Really, like most of it is just things that are influenced by things I heard growing up. So like the main riff to like UFO, like so that was like influenced like by surf music, because I always loved like surf music as a kid, you know, like Dick Dale, like the Pulp Fiction soundtrack and things like that. So that riff kind of came from there, and I actually had that riff when I was about 14. So I've been waiting all this time to kind of use this riff, because I could never use it. The kind of things I was involved in, you know, once I got to about 18, it was never really called out for surf music, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So this album, because there were no rules or anything like that, I could kind of play whatever I wanted. So I wanted to play some surf music, so I played some surf music, Captain Scarlet and Stingray and things like that. So like a lot of it just goes back to like my childhood and things like that, really. And Wild Blue Angel is obviously Jimmy's stage name. So Jimmy's there. Yeah, there's just the Devil's Jazz is a little bit of Stevie Ray Vaughan. So yeah, just a whole collection of things from all over, really.
Yeah. What had you? I mean, obviously, for people that don't know, what had you done previous before this solo album musically?
So I was in a band called the Violent Playground for about 10 years, and you know, we had some fun. We got to do some nice things, and it was chaotic, but that kind of went with the territory. And you know, it's kind of a mixed feeling for me, as you know, some of it I really enjoyed, some of it I didn't enjoy at all, really. And it kind of, once you got involved in it and you were into it and people started investing money into it, it became a different kind of animal. Like when I was there for the first 2 years, it was just a load of kids having fun. But once money got into it and expectation and all this kind of thing, it definitely did change, and I enjoyed it maybe less. And by the end of it, I was happy to get away from it, to be honest with you, because like it I don't know, it felt like it was too set on a certain path, and I didn't really necessarily like that. But that's all I kind of did. I was in a band for 10 years. I came to America, and then, you know, rather regrettably, I didn't really play much music for the next 10 years. You know, I've kind of been a musical nomad in a sense. I haven't really played anything for about 10 years. So, but here I am, I'm back. So great.
Which is wonderful to see. I mean, I couldn't believe it had been 10 years since you actually wrote anything original, and sort of, I mean, obviously you must have been playing and, you know, but obviously the inspiration wasn't there to actually, you know, record or write anything. I mean, obviously you know, what was the reason that made you think, you know, it's time to get back out there and see, you know, see if I've still got it? Is that what it felt like to you?
Yeah, pretty much, because it was, I got a wrist injury on my left wrist, and I couldn't play the guitar for about 3 months, and that was the first time in my life since I was about 10, 11 that I could not play the guitar, and I didn't have a say in the matter. You know, it was the first time where I hadn't been playing that much, but I could always, you know, pick it up and play it if I wanted. This was the first time I couldn't play it, and it really kind of brought it home to me that, you know, life is short and stuff like that, and you know, tomorrow I might not be able to play it at all. So I'd always wanted to make an album on my own, and I'd never really found the time to do it, or hadn't been in the frame of mind to do it. And this kind of like really spurred me on to get out there and kind of do it. You know, it gave me a kick in the arse basically. So I got out there, I started writing again, and the rest is history. You know, but when I first started it, I had very little confidence in my songwriting because, like I say, I'd been away from songwriting for such a long time, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, and I kind of hummed and hawed, and I don't think I really took it seriously. Like the first month or so of doing it, I was like, well, you know, I was kind of trying it because I felt guilty to try it, and then as a few things fell into place, I was like, you know, you can really do this, and it kind of snowballed from there on, and I got more confidence. And by the end of the album, probably some of the better songs were what was coming through. So yeah.
I mean, did it feel like you kind of picked up where you left off 10 years earlier, in a sense?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, even though that wasn't an intentional thing, I didn't really ever consider myself as having like a style when it came to like songwriting. But so like the last track on the album, Missouri Breaks, the title track, Missouri Breaks, where you have those kind of backwards effects and that kind of dark sound. So the last song we ever did with the Violent Playground was a song called The World Is Fire. And that basically, and Missouri Breaks, the title track, they don't sound too far away. Like they're very kind of dark. They have that kind of, you know, just a bleak kind of sound to them. And that's not me saying, oh, I want to take everybody to a dark place or whatever. That's just, you know, that's the sound I kind of like hearing and making. So I kind of did do that, and it did kind of sound like there was no gap between that and this in that kind of sense. But the rest of the album doesn't really sound like that. But the first song back, I kind of did pick up from where I'd left off because maybe that was all I knew at the time, you know.
Yep, definitely. I mean, with the we're going to talk about the recording process. I mean, obviously, was it just a case of do one song and just see how that felt, and then the other sort of came along after that? Did it feel? I mean, what was the basic setup for recording? Was it done at home? Was it?
Yeah. So it's done. This is my office here, and it's basically all done in this room. And a big part of what helped me was I discovered this guy who does like drum tracks, and he does drum loops and things like that, but he plays them all live, so you don't kind of have that like loop kind of feel to it. You know, it kind of feels organic, you know, so you get a lot more inspired when you hear a crashing, you know, kind of drum fill. So and there's an energy there that you don't usually get when you're just looping over and over and over. So I found this guy's fantastic drum tracks, and he's such a great player. He's called Jim Dooley, and he's on YouTube. He's from New York, and he plays in all different styles, and that was a massive part of it as well. Because when I heard that surf drum beat, I realized, oh, I've got a surf riff from when I was 14. Maybe this would work, and of course it did. And like a track like The Devil's Jazz, I would basically put his drum kind of beats on a playlist on YouTube, and I would just play along to them. So like I found myself like playing like to his jazz beat and had like a real kind of swing time to it with the brushes. And what I found was like if I'd have gone and got a session drummer, or if I'd have tried to program the drums myself, I would have never have said, oh, let's go get a jazz beat. Because I just not kind of from that mold, it would have been rock or blues.
Yeah.
So in having his drum beats, it took me to places that I wouldn't have gone. And from that came other songs. So that's kind of how it all kind of got going. Was I would have a few ideas here or there, but I would basically listen to this guy's drum beats and I would try and add something to that. And from there, it kind of just grew.
I mean, the drums are the main thing that stand out for me, apart from the guitar and obviously the bass and everything like that. I mean, but obviously you've recorded in various studios back home, obviously here in Liverpool and obviously in London. I mean, but obviously making this album from home, I mean, did it have a different feel to it as the songs were coming together?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main thing that happened when I was in my band was, yeah, we go to a fancy studio, you know, we go to Rockfield, you know, which has had all kinds of people go through. We go to Parr Street, which again, you know, we're talking like world-class establishments. But here's the thing is, yeah, the quality of those places was amazing, but we wouldn't have no time. You know, you'd have a week, and that's a week to master and mix.
Mm.
And I just found as well in my old band is we kind of had the attitude where we get a song, we play through it a few times and be like, okay, that's that. We're done. This song's finished. With this kind of recording process, there's no time limit. So if I wanted to spend, you know, a month on one song, I could. Not to say that, you know, that I aimed for that. Some songs came together quickly, some came over time. And what would happen is I would have a song like, say, like the Space Capsule. I would have like the first half of that kind of done, and I would just put it on my headphones and listen to it and work over and over and over again for the next few weeks while I was working on a different track. And then I would go back to the Space Capsule, so I'd have a break in between tracks. I wouldn't necessarily complete a track all in one go, and that listening back to it over and over again allowed me to kind of hear, okay, this doesn't work as much, this does work, and you refined it. Basically, you're refining it. And I never did that in my old band because it was always, well, this is done now, we're bored, you know, let's go do something else, kind of thing. And I think our attention spans when perhaps the greatest waste. Now I made this album for myself, so I wanted to be as good as I possibly could be, right? So I took as much time as I felt like I needed. So that's how it was definitely different this time.
Amazing. I mean, obviously, it must have felt like the pressure was off, and obviously, obviously, there's no time constraints. There was no saying, "Come on, we got to get this done. It's got to be recorded, mixed, mastered, out the door, you know, back on the road or whatever." So obviously, you had your own. You were able to do it, you know, in your own time, and obviously, as you said, the tracks evolve, and obviously, you're able to keep adding as you went along. But okay, so just with the method of songwriting, Carl. I mean, obviously, everyone has their own method of how they write, they record, and everything like that. But I mean, do you have a set formula for how you normally write songs, or does it change from song to song?
I try and keep it as simple as possible as a base. And, you know, from my years of listening to Black Sabbath, I write almost everything in minor. So a lot of I very rarely write something that sounds happy. Just the way I write music, you know. Some people only write happy songs, right? Just the way I do it is I always find myself in minor because I like the sound of it. So usually all my songs are in minor, and they usually all like kind of descents. So like, say for instance, like on UFO, like there's one part where we're going. Going down. Same with the Space Capsule. I tend to always go down on songwriting because I just love the sound of the descent, really. And same in the Empire of Devil's Jazz, again, another descent. There's no real set. I just try and base it. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it sounds good, I try and build on it. If it doesn't sound good, I just move on to something else, really. There's no... I have things that I do a lot of, like I say, the minor and the descents. But other than that, there's no real kind of rules to it. I just try and keep it simple and just see where it takes me, you know.
Amazing. I mean, obviously, you discussed the drummer you had on board. I mean, was there any? There's obviously other musicians that have come on to the record. I mean, there's a saxophone player on there, isn't there, in one of the tracks?
Yeah. His name's Jordan Mazza, and he's a fantastic musician. And I believe he's Peruvian, but he's based in Argentina. And I actually found him through Fiverr, which I know is something you do a lot of work on yourself. And he. You know, I just said to him, this is what I need. This is the key I needed in. And this is the kind of feel I want. And he's such a great musician. You know, he didn't need to ask a ton of questions. He just knew straight away what he was going to play. And just, you know, wonderful ears, a wonderful technique, feel. And it was great to really kind of have another musician from another continent. It didn't speak a lot of English, but, you know, music transcends all of that. You know what I mean? So it's just fantastic.
Amazing. I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, how long did the album itself take from literally from doing the first song to actually mastering the final track?
I want to say about 3 months, I think. That's a rough 3 months, but yeah, because it was kind of on and off for a bit. So the first two songs I had were Missouri Breaks and Rivets, and I honestly feel like those two songs kind of sound different to the rest of the album. It fits, but when I listen to them, I can definitely hear those are in a different kind of period to the rest of the kind of a thing. So I had Rivets and Missouri Breaks, and they were the two where once I got them, I was kind of like, maybe I can do this. That was kind of the tipping point right there. So from there on, I would say the whole thing took about 3 months, I think. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it must have been just a very fulfilling time for you. I mean, obviously, after everything that everyone's been through, I mean, obviously, people do different things. They write, they get around to doing things they never got to do. And, you made an album, which is something you can always treasure for life, I suppose. And but we're just going to talk a little bit about the track lists. We'll go for each song, okay? Because I was very fortunate to be one of the first people to hear some of these songs while they were still in the mixing process, and I was quite privileged to do that, to be honest. Just with track 1, UFO, which basically hits the ground running, and obviously you said that this was basically a riff that you basically came up with all those years ago when you were 14. So was it one of the first things you ever wrote?
That riff was probably one of the first riffs I ever made, yeah. But the UFO song itself on the album was one of I would say, definitely one of the last tracks to come through. I mean, and like I say, once I got into the rhythm of doing this whole thing, and I started writing more and more, the songs just kind of kept just coming out. Like Devil's Jazz and UFO and the Space Capsule, probably like the last 3 songs I did for the album, and they're probably the 3 that I like the most, really. So yeah, UFO kind of came together quite late, and it's funny because I had that surf rock riff and the surf rock drum beat, but I didn't know it was going to be about UFOs at that point. And I went and hang out with 2 of my buddies, and they're very conspiracy theory kind of people. And they were actually talking about UFOs and aliens and things like that. So that night I went home and I thought, I'm going to make this about UFOs. And I just went and found some samples about guys who believed they'd been abducted. And that's kind of where it came from. So it just came from the theme of it came from a conversation with my friends, and the riff kind of came from when I was a kid. So it's funny how it came together.
I mean, the minute I heard it, I thought this could fit perfectly into a sci-fi series from the 70s or a cop series or something like that, in America, and I thought this would be perfect, But no, I mean, it just hits the ground running, and obviously, you found bits of dialogue. I mean, all throughout the songs. I mean, because obviously, the instrumental, is what you were focused on. I mean, with the second song, the Capsule, I mean, obviously there's drums in it, narration, but this is one of the interesting ones for me because from what you tell me, this was all bass.
Right, yeah, absolutely. It was just all bass guitar. And I'm doing that descent, and I put the bass down, and that guy's drum track that he had, it was like a tribal kind of a feel. I think he called it like a Moroccan drum track, I think was the title of it. So again, I'm never going to play that unless I come across this. I'm never going to say, okay, I'm going to do a Moroccan drum track now. So that was another track where his playing really influenced the way the song went. And it just, because it sounded tribal, I started with a bass instead of a guitar, which I normally start with the guitar and then add the bass. And I put the bass down, and I'm like, maybe I should put a bit more bass down, and then a bit more, and a bit more, and I ended up having like 7 tracks of bass on it. And some of the reviews, actually, nobody has noticed that it's just all bass. Like, a lot of people think that there's a lot of swells on it, where the sound kind of swells in, and a lot of people think that's feedback. It's actually not. It's a bass guitar with a really heavy fuzz. And what I've done for each note is I've reversed it, kind of like Hendrix would do on like Are You Experienced, that track where you hear it kind of swell in, it goes zzz, you get that kind of sound. And that's what it is. It's not feedback. It's a bass note actually backwards. And because it's backwards, you hear it fade in because obviously the volume swell. And gave like this really kind of haunting kind of effect. So yeah, I just kept adding bass, and I was like, well, if it
Mm.
doesn't need guitar, I'm not going to put guitar on it for the sake of it. So yeah, it was quite an interesting track. You know, it was different again, and just I just had such a blast doing all these songs. I mean, I got to say that I had more fun doing this album than anything else in music. I really did.
Wow. I mean, I'm glad to hear that, mate. And you know, it's one of my favorites. I mean, it's very, very like Black Sabbath, Planet Caravan, you know,
Right.
type of influence. You know, I could clearly hear that. And you know, I'm just fascinated with the whole use of bass, really. You know, because obviously each track is different. You know, and it doesn't.
Right.
It kind of, you know, as you say, each track kept evolving as time went on, and it, you know, and that was probably part of the interesting experience. Is literally a track can grow, you know,
Right.
you know, you find things or things seem to fit perfectly well, and you know, which is great. It's fantastic. But so we're going to go on to track 3, which is Blue Wild Angel, which
Yep.
obviously from the first couple, this was actually the first track I heard, and the first thing that came to mind was that this was a tribute to your, I'd say, your guitar hero, shall we say?
Right. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. It was a tribute to Jimmy, and I tried to really capture what I felt like a modern kind of Jimmy would sound like. I'm probably miles away from what he would have sounded like. He'd probably be playing a bagpipe or something mad like that, you know. But I tried to just get a modern Jimmy sound now. So to not like to copy or anything like that, but just you know purely a tribute, you know, a homage. And that track came together like super fast. Like that is maybe the only track on the album where I would say 80% of it is just one take, like just the
Wow.
first take throughout there, and I would say you can probably tell that because it has more energy than a lot of the other tracks do. A lot of the other tracks sound more refined and kind of, I don't want to say processed, but they sound like they've you know, they've had more time on them. Whereas the Wild Blue Angel sounds more like a jam, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's purely because most of it was I just jammed that out one take over this drum beat, and I was like, you know, I really like this, and that was that, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, because like Hendrix's last recordings, basically, you know, from what I can gather, basically were jams that were literally just built in the, you know,
Right.
sort of came together in the studio. There wasn't really sort of a set, anything was written or anything, so it's just like roll tape and let's see what we come out with. So was this sort of like a Hendrix jam influenced track?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So kind of like when you said, was this album a continuation from what I'd done 10 years earlier? I tried to kind of have that kind of theme with this song, as the last few things I'd heard from like Jimmy were where he had a lot more of that kind of organic jamming going on, where it was less 3 minute kind of rock pop songs, and it was more kind of jams, you know, funk. And I think once he added like Billy Cox to the bass, it was a different kind of feel to when Noel Redman was playing the bass, and it really was kind of based off that, yeah, more the jamming and just see where it goes kind of a thing.
We're going to move on to track 4 now, which is Machina, which I got the sense that listening to the dialogue recordings that you added onto it, this sort of has the feel of the, you know, the dawn of modern technology and, you know, what people were feeling back in the, you know, 50s and 60s and 70s when technology was coming in gradually. And obviously what is interesting is that the recording process for this song hit a glitch, didn't it, at one point?
Yeah, I, so I bought some new guitar software to, you know, really get my guitars sounding, you know, even better than they were previously. And this new guitar software, basically the DAW that I had was an older version of Cubase, because I'm old fashioned, and it basically needed the new version of Cubase to run this plugin. So I'm like, oh, so I bought the new version of Cubase. And then the new version of Cubase, because I was that enthralled in just getting the new version of Cubase, I didn't bother to look at what operating system was needed. So I got the new Cubase, and I needed a new operating system.
Oh dear.
So like, it's like, oh. So during the process of upgrading to the new operating system, I had a glitch, and basically, for whatever reason, I lost the early track of Machinet, and I'd recorded like several tracks of synth, several tracks of piano, uh, kind of the drums, and I lost all of it and had to start from scratch. And that was really a kind of because like some songs you enjoy playing more than others, and you enjoy writing and recording more than others. And I actually probably, although I would say Machina has had a lot of good feedback in reviews. I don't, probably the track I like the least on the whole album. So for me to record it again was a bit of a chore for sure, you know. Because it is a kind of gloomy, synth kind of thing, you know, and there wasn't as much, you know, kind of going on with it. So it was just kind of just these samples and this kind of atmosphere. So I didn't actually have that much fun recording it. So then when I lost it and I had to record it again, I was like, oh no. At one point I was like, maybe I should just leave it off, but I was like, no, you can't do that. So I kicked myself in the ass and I re-recorded the whole bloody thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's quite ironic, really. I mean, obviously, as I said before, that hearing the dialogue recordings and, you know, this, like people saying, this new technology is coming,
Yeah,
and all
right.
that kind of thing. And modern technology actually didn't work out on this occasion for the track, but you know, still a great track. But I mean, we're just going to move on now to the Devil's Jazz, which is the longest track on the record. What I find interesting from it, listening to it from beginning to end, it has that kind of Doors feel to it, and obviously, and then as time goes on, it kind of morphs into the kind of Pink Floyd prog rock vibe. Yeah. Was that intended originally, or did it kind of just evolve from one track to another?
So originally, it was just a 3-minute song. The first 3 minutes that you hear, that are kind of the jazzy blues thing. It kind of was just that for 3 minutes, and then I had the other section, and I had these conversations where in the first part of the song you hear that guy who kind of, he's an outlaw, he's an armed robber, and he kind of, I think that he thinks you know, armed robbery is cool, because you can definitely hear that in his voice. He's got that kind of, you know, I don't care, you know, nobody takes me kind of a thing. And then I had these other recordings of people who were actually in jail. And the other side of the reality is, you know, you play silly games, you can win silly prizes, right? And when I heard these other guys talking on the other side of the bars, for want of a better word, where they were basically going to be in that cell for the next, you know, 50, 60 years, I kind of thought, well, that would be good to put it together to give both sides of the spectrum. Is yeah, some people can think it's cool, some people can glorify it, but there is a reality to it. Is I know there's that cliche thing, crime pays, but a lot of the time it really doesn't, you know. And you often see in gangster movies, you know, you'll see, you know, people kind of blow it up to be this kind of, you know, wow, look at this kind of thing, but you never really see a film of a guy spending 40 years in a jail cell, you know, because it wouldn't make for a good film. Oh. So I kind of wanted to emphasize that, you know, it's okay to play these games, but it can go so wrong, you know. I wanted to give both kind of sides of the spectrum.
With the next song, track 6, Rivets.
This was like the first song I made in about 10 years, where I didn't know I was going to make an album at that point, and I just had you know, this riff, and I just kept playing it over and over again. You know that, and then I tried to get fancy by adding like the odd time signal to it. And I never expected ever for it to be an album at that point. So I kind of feel like that one sticks out from the rest of the album kind of the most, because it was between Rivets and Missouri Breaks. I had a few ideas from Missouri Breaks, and that kind of was the first thing I did, but I didn't finish the song. And that's kind of what I'd been doing. I'd been getting these ideas, but never finishing songs. So Missouri Breaks followed on from the last band, but Rivets was the first song that I actually finished. I was like, okay, I finished the song. you know, maybe I should get some more. And then I was like, well, you've always wanted to make an album. Why don't you make an album? And then for quite a while, I was like, oh no, that's just stupid. Why would you do that? You know, and it took a while to get over that thing of, you know, like, I have to face facts that probably not that many people care, right? And that's just the reality. But I had to come to the conclusion that, well, you care, Carl, you know what I mean? And do it for yourself. You don't need to worry about any of that other nonsense. And once I kind of got in that mindset, that kind of just opened the doors where I could make a song with surfing. I could make a song with jazzing. I could make a song with just bass. It didn't matter anymore. There were no rules, no expectations. I just freedom. That's no expectations equals freedom, you know. And it's the first time I'd ever felt like I'd had that as well. So it was, like I say, I just had the best time. Really did.
Amazing, amazing, mate. Just going on to track number 7, which is one of my favorites. Just explain a bit about the title.
Yeah, it's 1711. So my youngest was born in January, my wife was born in July, and my eldest is born in November. So it's kind of, that was another thing this album was. It was very much a bucket list thing. I wanted to do an album, and I also always at some point wanted to make a song, you know, for my girls. And I never really had like a good time to kind of do it. I didn't just want to make one random song. So when the album came along, I was kind of like, you know, this would be a good time to do that. So I came up with something that I felt like that they would like, that kind of represented them. Something that sounded, you know, pretty soft and mellow. And I also wanted to hark back to a little of the old days, because there's a little passage in it that is kind of, again, a descent, but it's kind of the same descent as a very old song of mine called House of the Fly. So it was kind of cool to wrap all those things up all in one, you know, and kind of do a song for them. And it'll always be there. And, you know, when I'm long gone, that, you know, they'll still be able to listen to it. And I hope they can kind of hear the sound and know kind of what, you know, they mean to me, kind of thing. You know?
I mean, obviously, the piano piece you wrote for it is you know, fantastic. I mean, obviously, have your piano skills evolved over time? I mean, obviously, you started off on guitar. I mean, but obviously, from what I recall, you know, piano eventually, you know, came into the songs eventually. You know, towards the end of Violet Playground. Had
Right.
piano been something you've always wanted to do as well?
Yeah, I would say so, because it, you know, definitely gives a better feel to the song. So, you know, maybe I should get the old piano out. So yeah, I did that. But in terms of playing piano, I don't think I played it as much as I would have liked on this album. But I played it where I felt it needed it. I tried not to overplay any. So I didn't want to just say, well, you know, hey, I'd love some piano. I'm just going to stick some piano in. I felt like if it didn't work, then I wasn't going to stick it in, kind of thing. But piano works. I knew that song was going to have like violins and strings. So of course, violins and strings go kind of hand in hand with a piano better than a guitar, in my opinion. So it just seemed the natural thing to do was have piano in that song, really.
I mean, you should be very proud of it. I mean, you know, obviously, your wife and your 2 daughters must be, but you know, thrilled of the, you know, what you've done for them. You know, must be, you know, quite very fulfilling, but obviously, you know, reflective. You know, looking back and seeing where you started to where you are now. I mean, you know, listening to it, I mean, it has that very reflective kind of a feel to it. I mean, obviously, from where you started to where you are now. I mean, you know, obviously there was a big meaning in the title, obviously. So is it kind of like a piece of where you've come from and where you are now in your life?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. You know, well, last time I was making music properly, I wasn't a father, with I am now. You know, so yeah, I think it definitely is a kind of reflection of where I am now, kind of a thing. Yeah.
Amazing. So we'll just go on to the last track, which is Missouri Breaks. This was actually one of the joint songs that you actually completed, which inspired you to, you know, to do an album. Obviously, it has that feel of sort of, you know, I'm back, I'm here, I'm ready to get going again? You know, did it feel like that? I mean, from the minute from when you finished it, like obviously, as we've spoken about earlier, this is one of the tracks that inspired you to keep going, in a sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. This is probably the most important track on the album for me. But you know, it is a very dark track, so I don't expect a lot of people to like it because it is very dark. It's a dark subject matter. Obviously, the guy talking is quite unhinged. So you know, not everybody likes to listen to that, right? But yes, that was definitely the one where the more and more I got of it, the more and more I was like, you know, I can definitely make an album here. And not only can I make an album, does that sound and that dark kind of backwards, just menacing kind of sound. Well, when I got that guy's samples, I basically wanted to make a sound that sounded like Madness, right? But not Madness to the point where it's totally unlistenable. So I wanted to create an atmosphere of madness and kind of confusion. So when I was making that, I was like, you know, that there are no rules for making this album. You can make whatever you want. And this sounds like madness, and a lot of people might not like it. It doesn't matter. You're just going to make whatever you want to make, and it'll be what it'll be. And that kind of, you know, I made no concessions. I made just whatever I felt like making. And I really, really feel like that is the strongest track musically on the whole album. And of course, other people like different songs. I have a lot of people that like the Space Capsule the most. My dad loves UFO the most. One of my buddies loves Devil's Jazz. So everyone seems to like a different thing. But for me, Missouri Breaks is the one that I'm most proud of, and the one that definitely convinced me. Yeah, okay, well, let's do this. You know, let's not just do it. Let's put whatever we want out there, and if people don't like it, you know, it is what it is. You know, I'd like people to like it, but it's not the be all and end all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you've played in bands, and obviously, you know, obviously doing something solo, it must have been a, you know, the very fulfilling experience. But I do get that impression that all the tracks are different in terms of how they, you know, there's different styles in there. There's stuff that you weren't able to do, you know, say 10 years ago with your previous band. I mean, obviously, because you had that freedom, did it just feel like that, you know, they took the shackles off and you were able to throw in what you wanted to do? Did it feel like that
Totally.
from?
Yeah, totally. It felt like I could literally make anything I wanted, any kind of length I wanted, any kind of sound I wanted. But I did try and keep it all kind of relative. Like I was explaining about the piano, where I didn't just put something in for the sake of it. I put whatever I felt into it, but within reason that I felt it made sense. I didn't just throw as many instruments as I could into it. I didn't throw as many, you know, guitar solos in. I didn't say, well, every song's got to have a crazy guitar solo. You know, it wasn't like that kind of a thing, you know.
Amazing. But just going on to the artwork for the album, which I find, you know, very interesting. The front cover, for people who don't know, that was actually a photograph that was taken out on the docks of Liverpool, right by the famous Liverbird building. Was that something that was taken many years ago when you were still living in Liverpool, or was it on a trip back?
No, absolutely. It was taken many years ago. I want to say like 2010, something like that. It was taken. So quite a while back. Yeah, and it was never, of course, meant for an album cover or anything like that. It was just a shot taken, but I felt it was a pretty good representation, you know, because I did want to represent that, you know, Liverpool's my home kind of thing. So I wanted to have that. And then on the reverse cover, on the reverse side, is a picture of my two daughters in a place here in Vermont called Middlebury. So on the reverse side, I wanted to, you know, show that I'm a father now in Vermont, whereas back in Liverpool, I wasn't a father, and it was pretty much just me, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah. It has that kind of, that's the impression I got when I looked at both, and I thought, well, obviously this is, you know, the past, and on the front cover, and then you look on the back and they're your two daughters on the back, on the back cover. So I thought it must be sort of like a very reflective sort of, that was me in the past, this is you know, my life in the future, which
Right.
is great. But with the you know, the mixing and the mastering process, was that a long process? I mean, obviously, was it just on one track at a time, or were all tracks done, and then you would obviously work on them all together? I mean, was it a long process getting that done?
So I met this guy called Marvin. He was from a place, Tide Studios in London, and he basically changed the whole album because Marvin the Magician, I call him, because he's just unbelievable. Like, I would send him tracks that were, you know, okay, to put it lightly. He's just a wizard. You know, he could get things that sounded, you know, I don't want to say dull, but didn't really jump out. You know, and he's just got this knack of just knowing exactly what's needed. And once I established, you know, this is the guy for me, um, I would send him like 4 tracks at a time. So we did the album in 2 parts. I sent him the first 4 songs. He would mix and master them, and then we waited about a month and a half. I completed the rest of the album, and he would do the last 4 kind of songs. So it was done in 2 halves, the mixing and mastering. But he would usually take. I would say he took about a week to do each of the 4 songs, so about 2 weeks total. He did the first part in London in the studio, and then the second part he was actually visiting his father in Hanover. So the second part of the album was actually mixed and mastered in Hanover. So it was quite a multi kind of nation kind of effort, you know.
I mean, it must be quite strange. I mean, because obviously I contributed a track to the album, you know, my vocal. Yep. And I'm fascinated by the fact, you know, we're able to do all these things from home. We don't need to go into a studio anymore, which is in a way a bit of a sad thing, I suppose. But you know, in terms, did it feel strange? I mean, obviously you weren't going to be there in the, you know, at the mixing desk with him as Tom. I mean, was it just waiting to see what he came back with? And you know, there must have been a bit of that. Did you wish you were in the studio with him at that, you know, while it was all being done?
At first, yes, because that's all I'd ever been used to. But once this guy got going, you know, it really did. It became like a duo, like a double act. Because I just had so much faith in him. There was very few things where I said, okay, let's change this. What we've done here, very, very, very few things. He just kind of knew. He just was always on the money, and I never worried about it because his ability was such that I didn't want to say it to him because I didn't want to interfere, because he just knew so much more about what would make it sound better than I would, from a production side of it, and I just let him go to town on most of it. He's just honestly a genius. Like, really, and I've been lucky enough to work with some like really top people in top studios, and just this guy Marvin is just head and shoulders above them all. And that's no disrespect to the others, but he just has the ears, and he's quite a young guy, and I have no doubt that in a few years' time he'll be working on some pretty big stuff, like, for sure. It's just, you can just tell, you know what I mean?
I mean, obviously you both clicked. I mean, obviously that's the big thing, when obviously finding the right producer who works with the songs and brings the best out of them, and you know, obviously finding the right guy or, you know, team to work with. I mean, obviously that's a bit of a worry. I mean, how did you reach out? I mean, how did you find him eventually?
So it's quite devilish of me, but I was on Fiverr because you know, it's because I'm in small town Vermont or whatever. You know, there wasn't like I knew a load of guys who were mixing engineers or, you know, stuff like that. So I went to Fiverr, and of course that's one of the great things about Fiverr is there's so much choice, right? And
yeah,
what I did was I had the track Rivets, because that was the first song I finished fully, and I sent it to like 5 mixing engineers, mastering engineers, and I basically didn't give them much of a script.
Oh,
I basically said, "This is my track. I'd like you to mix it for me." Because Rivets is kind of an alt rock kind of sound, I said, I'm after somewhere in between, almost like a Pink Floyd Run Like Hell and a Muse kind of Assassin kind of a sound. And I said, just let me know. And his came back, and his was just head and shoulders above the other people. So I just said to myself, this is the guy for me, because some of those songs like The Devil's Jazz and UFO, like you quite rightly noticed, they've got a vintage feel to them.
yep.
But I didn't want it to sound like it was from the 50s.
Hmm.
Totally. I wanted it to sound modern, but still have the kind of aura of vintage. And he just knew that. And he's just so on the money. It was crazy. It was almost like he knew all about me and what I wanted even before we spoke properly. It's kind of spooky.
Is it possible that you might work together again in the future?
I'm halfway through a second album, so yeah, absolutely.
That's
So yeah.
fantastic. I'm really glad. I was going to ask you anyway if there was any plans for after, but we'll leave that for a bit later on. But just going back to the future, I mean, obviously we're moving on to that now. With doing these songs, recording them, I mean, is it possible we may see you back on stage performing some of these songs live if you got a band together? Is that something you might think about in the future?
I had kind of resigned myself when I first came to America to not record music anymore or not playing live anymore and things like that. And I kind of really had wrote the whole thing off. I just played it for my own kind of amusement. And even though I started recording the album, I was like, I don't want to go out live again. I don't want to mess about with all the kind of nonsense that goes with it. But it kind of has got me thinking, I'd love to go out and play live again. I wouldn't necessarily. So this album and the next album, I've kind of saw these as kind of just a one-off things, and I'm kind of going to do them and then just leave them as they are, as studio albums. But the experience and being around music again definitely has got me wanting to go out and play again. I don't necessarily think I'd want to play these songs because you got to think this album is what I call a studio album, which sounds kind of contradictory, but it really is. For me, it sounds like it belongs in a studio, not on a stage. So, some people have said that it does belong on a stage, but for me, I mean, the things like the saxophone, the voices, and the pianos and the strings, all of that. If you want to bring that to a stage, you've got to bring backing tracks, which again, that's a big undertaking, And if you don't have those things, then do the songs lose a lot of the kind of impetus? So I want to go out again, but maybe not. Maybe I might try and play one or two, maybe, not like there's going to be a lot of people at the front clamoring for Devil's Jazz, you know what I mean? So it kind of, I think I have better things for playing live than what are on these records, So
amazing.
yeah, I'm looking to get out.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. I heard you, when we got in contact, and you said that you were, recording again. I thought, God, about time. Be good, good to see you back out there and doing things. But obviously, it's you should be very proud of the album. I mean, what have you enjoyed the most about the whole thing? I mean, obviously, there's different aspects. There's the writing aspect. There's the recording aspect. There's the mixing aspect. What has been the most fulfilling thing for you?
I think, just getting it done. Because over the years, like I say, I'd always wanted to do it, but as a kid, there was, I didn't have, computers and things like that where you could do whole albums, right? I didn't have like the ability or the songwriting ability back then to do it. And then when I was in my band, not like I could turn around to the lads and say, "Oh, by the way, guys, don't mind me. I'm just going to make a solo album, even though we haven't made an album." Just there was never really a place to do it. And then when I got to America, like I say, I kind of it fell out of love with kind of writing music, playing it, so to speak. So there was never really seemed like what was an appropriate time to do it. So once I started doing it, and once it came closer and closer to the finish line, it was super satisfying. Like And once I'd finished it, I was like, yeah, you know, I really felt like a sense of achievement. Not that, you know, I felt it was to a certain standard, or, you know, all these songs good. I just felt good that I'd finished it. I'd actually seen it through, because I didn't know if I actually could when I started it. I genuinely, even though I was doing it, there was always a time till the very end where I thought, you know, I might just walk away from it, kind of thing. Because, you know, I do that a lot, and I think a big part of the reason why I would send tracks to people like yourself, I would send the track to you, and I'd send the track to my other buddy, was because I wanted to get people engaged in it. Because then, if they thought I was making an album and it didn't make it, I would I would disappoint them. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
kind of tried to get as many people, like, well, not as many people, but tried to get people who you know, I really respected their opinion. Tried to get them engaged with it. So, like, then I felt like I kind of, well, you know, I've said I'm doing it now. I've got to do it. You know, you've got to see this through, kind of a thing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, it's a fantastic album, and I, you know, love listening to it. And you know, it's just got something for everyone in it. You know, what I mean, obviously, you touched on it before. I mean, but obviously, making this album, has it obviously, you know, it has obviously inspired you to keep going. I mean, is this round one of the solo albums?
So I hit on this mad idea that I was going to make one every year for the next 10 years, but then I kind of stepped back, and I was like, you know, the cost of that, and the amount of time that would take. So I kind of stepped down from that, and I thought about it. But like I say, as I came to the end of this album, like, the songs were just coming and coming, and I was doing it so much. I was getting so much enjoyment from doing it. I was like, well, I'm not going to stop. So I'm halfway through a second one. Um, and like the first one where I made whatever I wanted to, this one is probably that to the power of 10. Like, I've been referring to the second one to myself as kind of like, this is kind of like Missouri Breaks, like Ugly Brother. Like, this one is, the first one wasn't very commercial, right, in sound. This one is definitely not commercial. Like, this one's going to take some strong ears, you know, and not because I'm particularly, you know, just sitting there making music, and I'm like, well, I hope most people don't like this, and only a few. It's not like that. It's just, these are the sounds I'm kind of coming out with that I enjoy doing, and it just so happens that, you know, they're a little bit dark, a little bit. I would say I would compare Missouri Breaks in kind of structure to kind of Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, it's nowhere near as good as Dark Side of the Moon, but in kind of structure where, you know, you have things like Money and Time, where, like, your average music fan can listen to, right?
Yeah.
But the whole album itself, you would have to have, you know, people who are more into music would be listening to the whole album, which you'd have some people who just pick up on the big songs from it. I would say the second album that I'm making is more akin to something like Animals and Pink Floyd, where, again, I'm not comparing it to Animals in, you know, in how good it is, but it's more the people who are really into Pink Floyd would listen to Animals. The people who are casual listeners probably aren't going to listen to Animals, you know, because some of the tracks are quite long, and I would say it's kind of like that. There's not a lot of, you know, 3 minute, you know, nod your head kind of things going on.
I mean, that wasn't their style, really. I mean, they did a couple of songs like that. I mean, Money was one of their big songs, but obviously there were a lot of deep cuts in their catalogue. I think the same with Zeppelin as well. I mean, Zeppelin never even released a single, you know, when I look back on it. So, I mean, but with, I mean, obviously Pink Floyd, I could hear a lot of Pink Floyd influences in there. I mean, obviously there's lots of other things as well. Buckethead's in there. There's Jimi Hendrix is a constant, you know, which I always remember, you know, he was one of your very big influences. But to people who are going to get the record, going to listen to the album, I mean, what is your message to them that are going to download it? What can they expect?
I think they can expect something a bit different, you know. I don't think it is a normal album, just by the fact that there's no singing on it. But at the same time, it's hard to call it an instrumental album, because of the narration, you know, kind of falls in between. And you know, it's kind of funny in a sense, like at the end of Devil's Jazz, where you have those prisoners talking about being in jail for 40 years or 50 or whatever. You could have somebody who could sing, right, and somebody who might be a great lyricist, and they might sing about being locked up in jail, right? But is that going to be actually more real than somebody who actually is talking about it? You know, it hits to the bone a lot closer when it's the actual person, you know. For that, I would say, you know, the album is quite real in that kind of aspect. Like a guy who's talking about being abducted by aliens, who's actually genuinely feels like he may or may not have been through it. You know, I don't know if he has or not, but he definitely feels like he has. That is definitely going to be a lot more kind of real than if I was to get a singer in and we were just to sing some lyrics. You know what I mean? It's not going to be for everybody. I mean, I knew that. I know that most people don't even listen to albums now, right? And I had one guy who did a video review of the album, and he went through each track, and at the end of it, he said that there is a danger when you make music like what I've made here, that you're going to alienate people, because a lot of people need to have their hands held through music now. You know, they need it to have a good beat, a good melody, or a good chorus, or it needs to be catchy, and all these kind of things. So it's none of those things. It's very uncommercial, which I'm not worried about in the slightest. You know, it makes no difference to me if 100 people listen to it or 10 people listen. It makes absolutely no difference to me. Because, and it, you know, it probably does sound a little egotistical that I say I made it for myself, but I really, you know, I spent such a long time with my old band worried about, oh, will these people like this? Will the record company like this? All this kind of stuff that shapes your music to not be true to what you are. And I said with this record, you know, I'm just going to be true to what I want to hear. If people like it, great. If not, it's not the be all and end all. I'm not going to worry about it. So I would say it's quite a ride. If you can be bothered listening to it, it's quite a ride. That's what I would say. But I don't know.
Well, I've listened to it many times, and you should be very proud of yourself. And you know, with me and all your friends back here, we're just so made up. You know, you're finally back out there, and you know, it must have been just a great experience from beginning to end. So obviously there is more to come, and I look forward to hearing the next album, and we'll definitely do an interview about that one. So Carl Anderson, Missouri Breaks.